Hello, everyone. I'm glad you're here. Please like and subscribe so I can tell more interesting stories. Now let's get started. It started like any other sunny Florida morning. Except it wasn't. I was sipping my coffee, scrolling through social media, half laughing at memes about lizard people and government conspiracies. You know the usual internet weirdness. But then, boom, there it was. A text. Short, brutal, cold, just 5 words. The FBI is at Mar-a-Lago. I blinked, thought it was a joke. Maybe another prank from one of those satirical news pages that lives to poke fun at politics. But no, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Twitter exploding. News alerts nonstop. Group chats melting down. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just a meme. This wasn't late-night comedy fodder. This was real. The FBI raiding Mar-a-Lago. Cue the goosebumps. Picture this. Palm trees swaying. The grand white and gold gates of Mar-a-Lago, usually just a backdrop for golf carts and Instagram selfies, now surrounded by black SUVs. Tactical agents in dark blue jackets, FBI printed in bold yellow, standing at attention like statues. No shouting, no chaos, just cold professionalism. That eerie kind of quiet you only get when things are about to go very, very sideways. And then came the knock. Well, not so much a polite knock, as it was a firm, unmistakable announcement. An agent walked straight up to the grand front doors. 3 heavy knocks. Bam, bam, bam. Inside, pure confusion. Staff frozen mid-task. Security looking at each other like, this isn't in the employee handbook. Somewhere, someone mumbled. Is this a prank? Are we getting punked? Another whispered. Nah, it's probably just a routine check. Oh, if only. Now, here's a fun historical side note. Mar-a-Lago wasn't always a political lightning rod. It was actually built in the 1920s by Marjorie Merriweather post the serial heiress. Yeah, the woman literally behind your breakfast cornflakes. She wanted it to become a winter retreat for presidents. Historians still debate whether she ever imagined it would one day be the site of an FBI raid. Probably not what she had in mind. Anyway, back to the chaos. Word spread like wildfire through the estate. Kitchen staff abandoned half-prepped trays. Tourists? Yeah. There were actually a few started pulling out their phones in disbelief, only to be immediately waved away by Secret Service agents. One security guard, bless his heart, tried to play it cool. Sir, can I help you? He asked an agent. The agent, totally deadpan, flashed the warrant. No words, just paper. The guard took one look and quietly stepped aside. Because you don't argue with 3 bold letters FBI. Here's the part that gave me actual chills. They weren't here for a chat. They weren't asking politely. This was a full-blown execution of a federal search warrant. Top-tier stuff. Something you normally see in cartel busts, mob investigations. Not Palm Beach golf clubs. By the way, odd little fact, Florida has the most golf courses of any state in the U.S., over 1 to 200. None of them, I bet, expected to be adjacent to the nation's biggest political scandal of the year. As agents moved in, a few folks outside started gathering. Tourists, neighbors, curious locals. One guy held a sign that said, "Free the golf cart files." Another wore a shirt that read, "Lock her up." Wait, what? The irony was delicious. Inside, the agents were focused. No drama, no shouting. Just a slow, methodical sweep of the property. Every room checked. Every drawer opened. Every locked cabinet unlocked. They knew exactly what they were looking for. This wasn't a fishing expedition. This was a surgical strike. I remember thinking, how did we get here? A former president's private residence, now the epicenter of a federal investigation over classified documents. Documents that, if you believe the reports, were supposed to be handed back to the National Archives a long, long time ago. Historians still debate whether there's ever been anything like this in American history. A sitting president, sure, scandals galore, but a former president raided by the FBI over potentially mishandling nuclear secrets, war plans, or God knows what. Totally unprecedented. The strangest thing, the weather was beautiful. Blue skies, birds chirping, a soft ocean breeze. As if Mother Nature was totally oblivious to the political earthquake unfolding beneath her clouds. One local news reporter, bless her, tried her best to summarize the scene. It's surreal, she stammered live on air. No kidding. Even the pigeons looked confused. And then, as the raid continued, someone whispered what everyone else was thinking, but was too afraid to say out loud. If they're here, that means they found something. Yeah, they weren't leaving empty-handed. The weirdest part. Just days before all this chaos, everything seemed weirdly normal. Like that eerie calm you get before a thunderstorm. You know it's coming. You just don't know when, or how bad it's going to be. In hindsight, the signs were all there. Quiet movements, strange legal filings, subtle murmurs in D.C. corridors, reporters sniffing around with that something's about to break energy. I should have seen it coming. But like most folks watching from the outside, I brushed it off as just another headline in the endless political circus. It all started months earlier with the National Archives. You know, those librarians who don't mess around. Turns out, when a president leaves office, there's this law called the Presidential Records Act. Basically, it says, hey, all your official papers, memos, top secret doodles, they don't belong to you. They belong to the country. Historians still debate whether the public really understands how serious that law is. Because let's be real, most people think of archives as dusty basements filled with old maps and declarations no one reads. But nah, the National Archives. Oh, they are relentless, meticulous, paperwork ninjas. Anyway, fast forward to early 2022. Archivists start raising eyebrows. Some important documents were, well, missing. Like really missing. We're not talking about a lost Post-it note here. We're talking classified briefings, sensitive materials, possibly national security level stuff. At first, it was polite. Letters, phone calls. Hey, can we get those boxes back? The response delayed, dodged. Then came a partial return. 15 boxes sent back in January. But when the archives cracked them open, oh boy. Not just random souvenirs. Nope. They found classified documents. Some marked top secret. Others labeled SCI sensitive compartmented information. That's government speak for so secret even the people holding this piece of paper shouldn't be holding this piece of paper. Naturally, that set off alarm bells at the Department of Justice. Like, wait, if this is what's in the boxes you voluntarily gave back, what else is still sitting down in Palm Beach? Now, here's a hilarious off-topic gem for you. Did you know that flamingos, those majestic pink weirdos, are actually native to Florida? Yep. Historians still debate whether they ever really left, but recent flocks prove they're making a fabulous comeback. Totally irrelevant. But you're welcome. Back to the real drama. DOJ officials tried to play nice at first. Negotiations, subpoenas, a visit in June from top DOJ brass. They even requested that Mar-a-Lago staff padlock the storage room where the documents were allegedly kept. Yes, a literal padlock. On a room holding potential nuclear secrets. You can't make this stuff up. I remember reading that and thinking, Wait, that's the security plan. A padlock from Home Depot. But here's where things escalated. During that June visit, investigators got a look inside the storage room. Boxes stacked haphazardly, no special vault, no armed guards, just shelves, cardboard boxes, some sealed, some not. The agents walked away from that visit concerned. Very concerned. So concerned that somewhere deep in the Justice Department, discussions quietly began about something nobody wanted to say out loud. We may need a warrant. And trust me, getting a search warrant for a former president, that's not like filing paperwork for a parking ticket. Nope. It goes straight to the top. Judges, attorneys general, FBI directors, everyone sweating bullets. Because they knew, once this went public, it was going to set the country on fire. Historians still debate whether there was ever any real precedent for this. Some point to Watergate. Others mention past scandals. But never in American history had the FBI executed a search warrant at a former president's personal home. In the days leading up to August 8th, everything felt fragile. DOJ officials triple-checked every legal step. The warrant was signed by a federal magistrate judge. Agents were briefed. Teams assembled. Quietly, secretly, no leaks, no media heads up. Just a cold, silent march toward what would soon become front-page news across the planet. And then, boom, the morning of the raid, an odd detail. They scheduled it for a Monday. Think about that. Ruining someone's week right at the beginning. Savage. Meanwhile, at Mar-a-Lago, it was business as usual. Staff prepping for brunch events. Guests lounging by the pool. Little did they know dozens of federal agents were just minutes away from walking through those gilded doors. Imagine the head chef in the kitchen halfway through yelling at a sous chef for burning the hollandaise sauce, and suddenly agents in dark suits file past the pastry counter. Talk about a Monday plot twist. And while the world would only find out hours later, the quiet before those sirens felt heavy. Like the air itself was holding its breath. Because once they crossed that threshold, there was no going back. So how did a bunch of cardboard boxes become the most explosive legal bomb in modern American history? Oh, buckle up. Because this is where things get downright absurd. See, the boxes weren't just boxes. No, these were Pandora's boxes wrapped in duct tape stacked in the basement of Mar-a-Lago, like someone was prepping for the world's worst yard sale. From the outside, they looked boring, brown, ordinary. A couple of them sagged at the corners. One even had a Sharpie label scrawled across it, something like 2017 taxes with question marks, as if even the packer wasn't sure what was in there. But inside, oh boy, we're talking everything from classified briefings, foreign intelligence reports, and materials labeled top secret/sensitive compartmented information, TSSCI, the kind of stuff you normally only see inside a SCIF. For the uninitiated, that stands for Sensitive Compartmented Information Facility. Basically, it's a glorified panic room for documents. Thick walls, no windows, no electronics. Definitely not a beach resort basement. Historians still debate whether anyone genuinely believed those boxes were harmless keepsakes, or whether this was a masterclass in plausible deniability. Either way, what was in those boxes was enough to make the FBI pack their gear dust off their search protocols and roll straight into Palm Beach. One of the weirdest parts. Among the sea of sensitive government files, agents reportedly found random personal stuff too. Golf shirts, framed photos, a random Time magazine cover with, you guessed it, a picture of himself on it. Classic. Oh, and here's your fun oddball fact for this section. Mar-a-Lago means sea to lake in Spanish. Bet you didn't know that. Rolls right off the tongue for a place that became ground zero for a constitutional crisis. Anyway, back to the boxes. Turns out, some of these documents weren't just labeled confidential. Nope. Some had markings indicating they related to nuclear capabilities of foreign nations. Others involved human intelligence sources, meaning real people whose lives could be at risk if this stuff got out. That's not just mishandling paperwork. That's national security danger zone territory. When the agents cracked open one particular box, sealed with nothing more than some brittle packing tape, they found folders marked in bright red letters, classified. Some were even double-banded with string, as if the physical string somehow made it extra secure. Spoiler, it doesn't. And here's the kicker. The storage situation, absolutely bonkers. No biometric locks. No keycard access. Just a padlock on a door in the basement. A literal padlock you could buy at a hardware store for $14.99. I kid you not. Some historians still debate whether the decision to store these materials like this was negligence, arrogance, or just plain disbelief that anyone would actually come looking. Now remember, the FBI wasn't flying blind here. The search warrant was specific. They weren't allowed to just wander around the mansion, poking behind drapes or flipping couch cushions. Nope. They had detailed descriptions of what they were authorized to look for in any government or presidential records created between January 20th, 2017 and January 20th, 2021. That's Inauguration Day to Inauguration Day for the last term. But as they opened more boxes, what started as a hunt for classified materials started uncovering a broader mess. Documents mixed with random memorabilia, press clippings, even old birthday cards. Yeah. Imagine finding a folder marked Eyes Only sitting next to a signed baseball from some charity event. It was like the most dangerous episode of Hoarders You've Never Seen. And get this, some boxes were so disorganized that agents had to pause just to figure out whether a sheet of paper was a classified military briefing or someone's old grocery list. Now, here's where the tension really started spiking. See, the FBI wasn't just here to recover missing documents. They were trying to figure out if any laws were broken in how they were handled, retained, or potentially shared. 3 laws were flagged during the raid. The Espionage Act. Yeah, the big scary one. Obstruction of justice, for potentially hiding or moving documents. Mishandling of classified information. A crime even without any intent to harm. Let that sink in. These weren't some minor slap-on-the-wrist infractions. These were serious charges, the kind that come with prison sentences measured in decades, not months. Historians still debate whether any former president or anyone in modern history has ever faced this trifecta of legal jeopardy in one go. And while agents worked, a weird silence hovered over Mar-a-Lago. Staff shuffled quietly down hallways. The occasional tourist tried sneaking a peek, only to be promptly escorted off the property. The clinking of silverware in the dining room sounded almost louder, more hollow. Somewhere in the background, a blender whirred. Someone was still making smoothies. Because apparently, life goes on even when the FBI is flipping through folders labeled Top Secret, Do Not Share, next to the fruit bar. And as each box was opened, as each folder was cataloged, that unspoken question hung heavy in the air. How in the world did it come to this? If you've ever wondered how a flimsy padlock, a few cardboard boxes, and some very questionable decision-making could spiral into a constitutional crisis, well, congratulations. You're living it right now. But here's where it gets even juicier. Let's talk about the storage itself. The infamous basement room. You've probably seen the pictures by now, or the recreations floating around on cable news. Drab, gray concrete walls, fluorescent lights that flicker just enough to make you question your life choices. A room that screams seasonal Christmas decorations go here, not nuclear secrets of the free world. When the agents walked into that storage room, the first thing that hit them wasn't the gravity of the situation. Nope. It was the smell. a weird mix of damp carpet chlorine from the nearby pool and oddly old golf shoes. I mean, look, even the most diehard fans would have to admit, this wasn't exactly Fort Knox. Here's a wild historical tidbit for you. Mar-a-Lago, despite being a private club now, was originally offered to the U.S. government by its original owner, Marjorie Merriweather Post, to serve as the official winter White House. The government said nah, because it was too expensive to maintain. Historians still debate whether they regret that decision now. Spoiler, they probably don't. Anyway, back to the basement. The boxes weren't even labeled consistently. Some had Sharpie scrawls like POTUS, letters, or North Korea, stuff. Others were blank. A few were so water damaged that the bottom flaps sagged when agents tried to lift them. And then came the moment everyone dreaded, but also expected. A red folder. Bright, unmistakable, practically glowing under the cheap overhead lights. TS-SCI. Stamped on the cover. Translation top secret. Sensitive, compartmented information. The holy grail of classified material. One agent reportedly muttered under his breath, "Oh man, this is not good." They peeled it open, and inside documents about foreign military capabilities, intercepted communications, and what experts later whispered could include nuclear readiness data. That's not just paperwork. That's the kind of information that in the wrong hands could alter the balance of power globally. But wait, because it gets even weirder. Next to that red folder, a plastic bin labeled Trump's Birthday Party 2018. Inside deflated balloons, a novelty hat, and a framed Time magazine cover featuring a photoshopped picture of Trump staring down various world leaders. Because, of course, historians still debate whether this level of document storage chaos was negligence or sheer hubris. Personally, I think it was both, with a generous splash of, I didn't think anyone would actually check. The agents kept digging. Another box. This one had a sealed manila envelope with a sticky note that said, "Return to Jared." Inside, classified documents related to Middle East peace talks. Not joking. Oh, and here's your totally off-topic but fun fact for this section. Did you know that Palm Beach has a law limiting how tall hedges can be? Yep. To protect ocean views, even FBI raids can't mess with the sanctity of Florida's perfectly manicured shrubbery. Back upstairs, the tension was growing. Secret Service agents were visibly uncomfortable. See, they weren't there to interfere with the FBI, but they were responsible for securing the premises and the people inside. It was this bizarre standoff where everyone was doing their jobs, without looking like they were doing their jobs. Staff members whispered to each other. Some tried sneaking peeks around corners, only to be shooed away. Others texted friends with vague, panicked updates like, "Something big's happening. Don't ask. Turn on the news." And outside, oh boy. Word was starting to leak. Reporters were assembling at the gates. Helicopters circled overhead. Protesters trickled in, some holding signs of support, others screaming about tyranny. One guy even showed up in a colonial-era outfit, ringing a bell and yelling, "Hear ye, hear ye." I wish I were kidding. But inside, the agents were all business. As box after box was opened, the scale of the situation became undeniable. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't some paperwork snafu. This was massive. Files were photographed, items cataloged, every single piece logged meticulously, chain of custody secured. Because if there's one thing the FBI understands, it's that you don't walk out of a place like Mar-a-Lago with top-secret folders unless your paperwork is tighter than a drum. One agent, while sealing an evidence bag, reportedly sighed and said, "This is going to be a chapter in history books." No doubt, historians still debate whether the agents felt pride, dread, or some strange combination of both. Because, yeah, no matter which side of the political divide you're on, you knew right then and there that the country had just crossed a line no one ever expected to cross. And as the last folders were sealed and the evidence trucks rolled out of those ornate gates, one thing was crystal clear. This wasn't just about boxes anymore. Let's talk about the warrant. Oh yeah, the piece of paper that turned Mar-a-Lago from a luxury playground into ground zero for one of the most historic federal investigations in U.S. history. And trust me, this wasn't your run-of-the-mill search warrant. Nope. This one came wrapped in layers of legal red tape political explosives and enough nervous energy to power the entire East Coast grid. First, getting a warrant like this, not easy. In fact, it's nearly impossible. We're talking about raiding the private residence of a former president. This isn't busting into Jimmy's vape shop because he's late on taxes. Nope. This is the kind of thing that makes every DOJ lawyer, every federal judge, every senior official lose sleep for weeks. Historians still debate whether this decision was made purely on legal grounds or whether the political risk made them hesitate until the very last second. Either way, it happened. And when it happened, it was loud. Behind closed doors, the Justice Department was sweating bullets. First, they had to convince a federal magistrate judge that probable cause existed real concrete evidence that a crime had been committed. Not a theory, not a hunch. Evidence. The kind that makes judges sit back, rub their temples, and go, "This is serious." Now, you might think it's as simple as submitting a few papers. Nope. The FBI had to outline in gruesome detail what they believed was stored at Mar-a-Lago, why it was illegal to have it, and why a subpoena wasn't enough. And here's a hilarious little detour for you. Did you know that the Supreme Court has an official basketball court true story? They literally call it the highest court in the land. Absolute dad joke energy, but it's 100% real. Anyway, back to the warrant. The DOJ also had to explain why this raid couldn't wait. Why not just send another polite letter, another subpoena? Well, reportedly, they had evidence suggesting that documents were being moved hidden even after prior requests to return them. That's not just refusal. That's obstruction. That's "we might not find these documents if we wait another week" level serious. When the judge finally signed the warrant, you could practically hear the collective gasp from every legal scholar in D.C. Historians still debate whether the government underestimated how massive the public fallout would be. I think deep down they knew. Oh, they definitely knew. The warrant wasn't just for any old papers. It specifically authorized the search and seizure of documents related to violations of the Espionage Act, obstruction of justice, criminal handling of classified information. Yeah, the Espionage Act, big scary law, originally written in 1917 to stop spies during World War I, and now being dusted off for Palm Beach. Agents were authorized to search not just the basement storage, but all rooms used or available to be used by the former president and his staff. That includes offices, bedrooms, even the private safe. Oh yes, the safe. Cue dramatic movie music. Somewhere in the bowels of Mar-a-Lago was a private safe. Agents cracked it open during the raid. And what was inside? Well, reports say it wasn't exactly national treasure levels of mystery. No Declaration of Independence, no secret maps. But there were documents. Sensitive ones. Some classified. Others, well, hilariously mundane. At least one agent reportedly chuckled when finding random memorabilia inside. A Sharpie-signed baseball. A framed photo with Kid Rock. Because, of course. Meanwhile, upstairs, the tension was so thick you could spread it on toast. Staff hovered nervously. Secret Service agents paced quietly, doing their best impression of statues. Everyone knew this was the kind of day that gets etched into history forever. And outside, oh boy. By this point, the media frenzy was fully unleashed. News helicopters buzzed overhead. Protesters and supporters lined the gates. Some held signs like "Defend Democracy." Others waved flags that read "Stop the Witch Hunt." One guy even showed up dressed as Uncle Sam, riding a fake bald eagle. Because if there's one thing you can count on in America, it's that political crises bring out the cosplay. A reporter from a local station tried to narrate the scene live. Well, folks, it's just surreal out here. Yeah, no kidding. As the FBI worked their way through the property, the weight of what they were doing wasn't lost on anyone. This wasn't just about recovering documents. This was about setting a precedent, about answering the question no one ever thought we'd have to ask. Is anyone truly above the law? Historians still debate whether executing this warrant was the right move, whether it upheld the sanctity of justice or shattered the fragile glass of political norms in the process. But one thing's for sure. Once the seal on that safe cracked open and those final folders were lifted into evidence bags, there was no undoing it. No walking this back. The line had been crossed, and the whole world was watching. By the time the agents finally started hauling out evidence, the headlines were already writing themselves. But let's be honest, nobody, not even the FBI, expected what they'd actually uncover. I mean, sure, they were looking for classified documents. But what they found? Oh, it was a grab bag of national secrets, bizarre personal keepsakes, and enough questionable storage decisions to make a government archivist faint. The first thing that got everyone's attention were those bright red folders, you know the ones, stamped in all caps classified, bold, unmistakable, impossible to miss, sitting on top of random piles of, well, randomness. One agent opened a box, expecting maybe some files. Instead, golf trophies, a signed Shaquille O'Neal basketball, and wedged right between them, a folder labeled Foreign Nuclear Capabilities. You could practically hear the collective facepalm echo through the basement. Historians still debate whether this was negligence, defiance, or simply the most chaotic filing system in presidential history. Honestly, could be all three. And it wasn't just nuclear stuff. They found documents detailing foreign intelligence sources, real human assets in hostile nations. Stuff that, if leaked, wouldn't just ruin someone's day. It could get people disappeared, permanently. But wait, because this gets even weirder. In one drawer, a collection of Sharpies, uncapped, half-dried. Next to them, a stack of printouts from Twitter. Actual tweets, highlighted, annotated, like someone was keeping receipts on internet beefs. Because apparently, when you're a former president, you don't let bad tweets go quietly into the night. Now here's your obligatory weird history fact for this section. Did you know that during the Cold War, the CIA developed a robot spy cat? Yeah. It was called Acoustic Kitty. They literally tried to wire a microphone into a cat to eavesdrop on conversations. Historians still debate whether this was peak genius or peak desperation. Spoiler, it did not end well for the cat. Anyway, back to the raid. The agents also found encrypted digital drives. Password protected, unlabeled, mysterious. Tech experts were immediately called in because, no one's risking plugging that into a regular laptop. For all they knew, it contained war plans. Or maybe a backup copy of the Home Alone 2 cameo. Who knows? There were also handwritten notes, scrawled in sharp, aggressive handwriting. Some were letters from foreign leaders, North Korea's Kim Jong-un's infamous love letters, for example. Others were post-it notes with instructions like, "Don't forget Hannity call," scribbled across the top. At this point, even the most seasoned FBI agents were reportedly exchanging glances like, "Is this real life? Are we actually doing this?" Yes. Yes, they were. But it wasn't just about what was found. It was the sheer recklessness of how it was all stored. Critical intelligence documents tossed next to novelty pens. Confidential memos stuffed between press clippings. A folder marked Eyes Only sitting directly underneath a box of red MAGA hats. And let's not forget the safe. Oh, the safe. People were buzzing about that thing long before the warrant even dropped. When agents finally cracked it open, it didn't unleash a torrent of smoking gun evidence. But what it did contain still pretty wild. Inside, a set of presidential pardons, unsigned drafts. Just sitting there. A folder labeled Russia, Miss C. Yes, miscellaneous Russia. Your guess is as good as mine. And in peak reality TV fashion, a handwritten note on White House stationery that simply read, "They can't get me if they can't find it." No one knows what it was. No context, just vibes. Historians still debate whether this was some kind of failed James Bond villain subplot or just someone who never learned how file folders work. Meanwhile, upstairs, the temperature was rising. Literally. Florida humidity doesn't care if the FBI is raiding a mansion. Staff nervously passed bottled water to agents. Secret Service kept a polite but clear distance. And the kitchen still pumping out Cobb salads like nothing happened, because brunch waits for no man. Outside, the scene had become a circus. Protesters screaming, supporters waving flags, reporters practically climbing trees to get better shots. One guy showed up with a giant inflatable rat dressed in a suit. No explanation. Just pure American protest energy. The longer the raid went on, the more chaotic the speculation became. Social media exploded. Rumors flew. Some claimed the FBI was planting evidence. Others insisted they were looking for proof of alien cover-ups. No, seriously. That actually trended for a few hours. And yet back inside, the agents remained calm, focused, steady. Because while the world argued over conspiracies, they were bagging and tagging everything that crossed the line from souvenir to national security risk. Historians still debate whether this operation marked a turning point in presidential accountability or opened a Pandora's box of political vengeance. Honestly, probably both. But one thing was obvious. As the last evidence bag was sealed and the agents prepared to roll out, there was no putting this genie back in the bottle. Whatever came next, the fuse had officially been lit. So, here's the million-dollar question. Everyone started asking. The second this story hit the news cycle, how did it even get this far? I mean, seriously. How do boxes of classified documents end up shoved between golf trophies, novelty hats, and old birthday cards in a basement at Mar-a-Lago? It wasn't like there weren't chances to fix this before it went nuclear. Oh no. The government had tried several times, actually. There were letters, polite requests, then not-so-polite requests, subpoenas, negotiations, even a personal visit from the Department of Justice in June, just 2 months before the raid. Picture that meeting. Top DOJ officials in suits sitting across from Trump's lawyers in a gilded lounge, sipping water that probably costs more than my phone bill, saying, "Hey, about those boxes, you really need to give them back." Trump's legal team. Oh, they smiled, nodded, even agreed to padlock the storage room. Yep, a literal Home Depot padlock. Because apparently that's how we secure top-secret government documents now. Historians still debate whether that was a genuine attempt to cooperate or just a brilliant stall tactic. Either way, it didn't work. See, the problem wasn't just the presence of classified material, it was the pattern. The National Archives had been raising red flags since January when they first received 15 boxes back and found classified materials mixed in with newspapers, random letters, and who knows what else. That's when the DOJ got involved. And when they started asking questions, pointed ones, things got messy. fast. Now, here's your oddball history fact for this section. Did you know the White House has a secret underground bunker? Yep, it's called the Presidential Emergency Operations Center. Originally built during World War II, it's been used during crises ever since. Ironically, way more secure than a Palm Beach storage closet. Anyway, after months of back and forth, the DOJ finally issued a subpoena in May demanding any remaining classified documents. Trump's lawyers responded by saying, and I quote, that after a diligent search, there were no more classified materials at Mar-a-Lago. Yeah, about that. Turns out, while that statement was being signed, documents were allegedly being moved. Like physically moved. Security footage showed boxes being shuffled in and out of the storage room. Some even speculated whether certain items were relocated to other parts of the property. That's obstruction, and not the cute kind, the felony kind. Historians still debate whether this was calculated misdirection or a total misunderstanding of how serious this law is. Either way, the FBI wasn't amused. By July, the DOJ realized they had a choice: trust the word of the legal team or go find out for themselves. Guess which option they picked? And the crazy part, even as the warrant was being prepared, even as agents were quietly coordinating the raid, Trump and his inner circle were still holding events at Mar-a-Lago. Weddings, dinners, fundraisers, guests sipping cocktails 3 floors above a basement that was about to become the most famous evidence locker in U.S. history. The sheer normalcy of it all was almost surreal. Meanwhile, DOJ officials were losing sleep because they knew that once this went public, it wouldn't just be about the law. It would be about politics, about optics, about whether the public would see this as justice or as a witch hunt. And oh boy, when word finally got out, the reaction was immediate, explosive, divisive. Some people cheered. Finally, no one is above the law. Others screamed, this is a political hit job. Social media melted into a swirling mess of memes, conspiracy theories, hot takes, and people arguing with their cousins on Facebook. Cable news anchors barely blinked for 48 hours straight. Panels of legal experts were summoned like Pokemon. Twitter Spaces exploded with debates that ranged from, this is the end of democracy, to actually this is how democracy works. And while the noise got louder, the facts stayed stubbornly simple. Boxes of classified documents were not supposed to be sitting in a basement, not supposed to be stored next to golf shirts, not supposed to be casually shuffled around like someone reorganizing their garage. Historians still debate whether this saga was inevitable or whether it could have been avoided with a little more caution and a lot less stubbornness. But here's what was now crystal clear: this wasn't going away. The legal machine was grinding into motion, the country watching with popcorn in hand. And Mar-a-Lago, no longer just a luxury club, it had become the scene of the crime. You know what happens when news like this hits the airwaves? Chaos. Absolute, unapologetic fireworks-level chaos. Within hours of the raid being leaked to the media, the country basically split into 2 very loud, very angry camps. On one side, people screaming, no one is above the law. Their group chats were blowing up with links to court documents, breakdowns of the Espionage Act, and memes of the Mar-a-Lago gates photoshopped into prison bars. On the other side, fury. Absolute fury. Accusations of a political witch hunt, government overreach, and deep state conspiracies spread faster than wildfire in a California summer. Historians still debate whether the leak of the raid was intentional, accidental, or some combination of both. Regardless, once it was out, there was no stuffing this back into the box. Not ever. Outside Mar-a-Lago, the scene turned from curious onlookers to full-on circus. Supporters waving massive flags, protesters chanting slogans. Homemade signs ranged from "Lock him up" to "Save our Republic." And of course, that one guy, dressed head to toe in an eagle costume, shouting 1776 starts today. I mean, it wouldn't be a political scandal without some cosplay, right? Oh, and here's your fun weird fact for this section. Did you know the Pentagon actually has more bathrooms than any other office building in the world? Yep, over 280 restrooms. Not because the employees drink too much coffee, but because when it was built in the 1940s, segregation laws required separate facilities. Wild right. Anyway, back to the circus. As media trucks lined the roads, helicopters buzzed overhead, and every journalist in the Western Hemisphere scrambled for a live feed. Legal experts hit primetime news faster than you can say, Espionage Act. Talking heads popped up on every channel, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, even late-night comedy shows. Everyone had a take. Hot, cold, scalding. One anchor dramatically opened her segment with "Never in the history of the United States has the home of a former president been searched by federal agents." Historians still debate whether this was the single biggest political earthquake since Watergate, or if it was something even bigger. Social media. Oh, forget it. It practically melted. At Mar-a-Lago, raid trended globally. TikTok exploded with skits, breakdowns, conspiracy theories, and more than a few parody songs. Someone even remixed the sound of the FBI knocking into a dance track. Honestly, kind of catchy. Inside political circles, it was DEFCON 1. Some politicians immediately rushed to the cameras. "This is tyranny," some shouted. Others calmly but firmly said, "This is accountability." The spin machines were running hotter than a Florida sidewalk in July. And then, the fundraising emails. Oh yes. You better believe political PACs on both sides wasted 0 seconds flooding inboxes with subject lines like, "They raided his house," or "Defend the rule of law, donate now." One particularly bold message even read, "First they come for him, then they come for you." Dramatic, absolutely. Effective. Oh, you better believe it. Millions poured in overnight. Meanwhile, back at Mar-a-Lago, staff were trying to keep some semblance of normalcy. Weddings were still scheduled. Brunch still had to be served. Imagine sitting poolside, sipping a mimosa, while just yards away, federal agents were walking out with boxes of classified material in evidence bags. Florida, man. Never a dull moment. Reporters camped outside were throwing wild theories at the wall. One asked, "Are there nuclear secrets in those boxes?" Another countered, "Or is this just over some love letters from Kim Jong-un?" Honestly, no one really knew yet. The affidavit, the detailed document explaining the probable cause for the raid, was sealed, locked down tighter than that questionable basement safe. Historians still debate whether sealing that affidavit was the right call. On one hand, it protected an active investigation. On the other, it left the public vacuum wide open for wild speculation, and oh boy, did it flood in. Telegram channels exploding with claims that the FBI was after secret alien documents. Twitter. Some users insisted the documents were proof that Bigfoot was a government experiment. Facebook. Oh man, if I had $1 for every cousin posting, I'm just asking questions. I could buy Mar-a-Lago myself. In reality, the truth was both simpler and scarier. This wasn't about aliens, or Atlantis, or secret time travel devices. It was about classified documents, national security secrets, and whether the laws that applied to everyone else actually applied to former presidents too. The political machine kept cranking. Lawyers for the former president went on every friendly network possible, hammering home phrases like unprecedented overreach and weaponization of the justice system. Meanwhile, legal analysts kept popping up saying, "Guys, the Espionage Act isn't about spying. It's about handling classified material improperly. Huge difference, but nuance. Yeah, good luck with that." The public debate had already boiled over into tribal warfare. You were either all in or you were the enemy. And deep within the Justice Department, the quiet hum of strategy meetings grew louder. Because while the noise outside reached a fever pitch inside, they were laser focused on one question: what happens next? Here's where things started getting legally spicy. The raid was just the beginning. Once the dust settled, well, figuratively, because Florida humidity doesn't allow anything to actually settle, the real battle kicked off. The legal minefield. Let's be clear. The FBI didn't just collect a couple of sticky notes and a few expired golf coupons. No. They walked out with troves of documents marked Top Secret SCI and everyone's favorite, No Foreign. Translation: not releasable to foreign nationals. Not even close. This stuff wasn't supposed to see the light of day, or the inside of a Palm Beach basement. So now, the question became what laws were actually broken. Cue the Espionage Act. Oh yeah, that scary old school World War I era law with a name straight out of a spy thriller. People hear espionage and immediately think of trench coats, fedoras, and microfilm hidden in shoe heels. But the truth, it's a paperwork crime, a very serious one. Mishandling national defense information, even if you don't hand it to foreign spies, can still get you slapped with felony charges. Historians still debate whether the Espionage Act should even apply to a former president. After all, this law wasn't designed with Mar-a-Lago's basement in mind. But it turns out, the law doesn't care about real estate. Then there's obstruction of justice. You know, the "hey, maybe moving boxes after receiving a subpoena isn't the smartest idea" type of crime. And spoiler, security camera footage allegedly showed exactly that: boxes being shuffled around right after the government asked for them back. Not a good look. And we can't forget mishandling classified documents. That's the crime you commit, even if you didn't intend harm. Just being careless is enough. The law is crystal clear. Classified material belongs to the U.S. government, not your garage, not your golf club, not your man cave. Here's your fun off-topic fact for this section. Did you know the CIA once made an actual spy pigeon program? Tiny cameras strapped to pigeons to fly over enemy territory, snapping photos. Historians still debate whether it worked. Spoiler, mixed results. Turns out, pigeons aren't great at following GPS directions. Back to the drama. Trump's legal team scrambled. First, they demanded the appointment of a special master, basically an independent referee, to review the seized documents and decide what investigators could or couldn't see. Their argument: some of the material might be protected by executive privilege or attorney-client privilege. Legal experts split. Some argued executive privilege doesn't apply to classified government property after you leave office. Others shrugged, knowing this was uncharted legal territory. No former president had ever tested these waters before. Historians still debate whether this special master tactic was a genuine legal safeguard or a well-played delay strategy. Either way, it worked. It bought time. It slowed things down. Headlines shifted from FBI raid to legal battle over documents. Meanwhile, prosecutors were methodically reviewing what they'd recovered. They weren't rushing. No leaks, no wild statements. Just quiet, steady steps toward building something. Whether it was a criminal case, a report, or a historic cautionary tale no one knew yet. And politically, oh boy. If you thought the raid set the country on fire, the legal battle was gasoline on that fire. Supporters called it persecution. Opponents called it accountability. News segments became boxing matches. Panelists screamed over each other like it was the finals of America's Got Indictments. And through it all, one question loomed over the nation like a thundercloud. Would they actually charge a former president? Nobody knew. Nobody could even guess. Legal scholars pored over constitutional law. Talk show hosts speculated between commercial breaks. Twitter lawyers, oh yeah, everyone became a Twitter lawyer, debated whether handcuffs fit over cufflinks. The DOJ, silent, focused, cautious. But behind that silence, a massive, unprecedented legal calculation. Because this wasn't just about the documents in the basement. This was about whether the rule of law applied to everyone, even someone who once had the nuclear codes. Historians still debate whether prosecuting a former president would strengthen democracy or tear it apart. The stakes astronomical, the consequences unknown, and as cable news shows flash graphics like "The Raid That Changed Everything" or "America." On edge. One thing was certain, there was no going back now. The legal fuse was lit, and the clock was ticking, and here we are, the aftermath. Because if you thought the raid itself was the story, oh no, my friend. The real story is what came next. The shock waves didn't stop at the gates of Mar-a-Lago. They rippled outward through Washington, through every media outlet on the planet, and deep into the veins of the American public. The first and most immediate effect: the political earthquake. Everyone, and I mean everyone, scrambled to pick a side. You couldn't walk into a coffee shop, scroll through social media, or even stand in line at the DMV without hearing someone mutter something like, "Did you hear about the raid?" or "This country's falling apart." Historians still debate whether this moment will be remembered as the day American democracy proved itself resilient, or the day the cracks became too big to ignore. Inside the political sphere, the reaction was instant and predictably explosive. Some politicians jumped in front of cameras, yelling about weaponized government overreach, while others solemnly declared, "No one is above the law." And while both sides screamed past each other, the DOJ just stayed quiet. No press conferences, no dramatic speeches, just a steady, relentless focus on the investigation. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the legal machinery was grinding at full speed. Prosecutors began weighing options: charge or not charge. What does it even look like to indict a former president? No one knew. This had never happened before. Here's an absolutely wild, off-topic fact for this final section. Did you know that there's an official Secret Service museum that's so secret it's not even open to the public? Yep. Inside, they've got counterfeit money, spy gadgets, and even items from assassination attempts. Historians still debate whether this is the coolest museum you'll never get to see or the most frustrating. Anyway, back to the fallout. Legal scholars started drafting op-eds so fast you could almost smell the burning keyboards. Some warned that charging a former president could permanently damage the fabric of the nation. Others argued the exact opposite. If we don't enforce the law now, we never will. And then came the court filings. A slow drip of details, each more shocking than the last. Lists of what was seized. Photos of classified documents spread out next to Time magazine covers and random personal items. Evidence tags hanging off folders like grim little flags. The public couldn't look away. News ratings soared. Every hour, a new theory, a new leak, a new bombshell. And yet inside, Mar-a-Lago life tried to go on. Members returned for dinners, parties, and poolside cocktails. Staff carried on serving hors d'oeuvres in the same building where just weeks earlier, federal agents had hauled out boxes labeled top secret. The surrealness of it all was almost too much to process. Historians still debate whether the real damage was legal or psychological, whether this shattered America's image of the presidency forever, or whether it was just another chapter in an already chaotic era. And here's the thing. No matter what side of the aisle you're on, no matter how you interpret the laws, the politics, or the media spin, one truth became unavoidable. This had never happened before, not even close. The raid at Mar-a-Lago didn't just open boxes filled with classified documents. It opened a box that the country doesn't know how to close. A box filled with questions about power, accountability, and whether the system can survive testing its own limits. The legal battles will continue. The courtrooms will fill. Cameras will roll. Commentators will shout. And the world will watch as America figures out in real time what it actually means to say no one is above the law. And as for Mar-a-Lago, well, those golden gates will keep opening. The golf carts will keep rolling. The poolside mimosas will keep flowing. But it will never be the same again. And that, my friends, is how it all unfolded. Quiet knocks at the door. Cardboard boxes stacked in a dim basement. And a storm that rolled out far beyond the Florida coastline. You know, when I started digging into this story, I thought it would be about documents, about laws, about red folders and classified stamps. But the more I read, the more I realized it was about something bigger. Way bigger. It was about whether the rules are real, whether the promises written on old paper still matter, whether the system we've all watched, cheered, criticized, and let's be honest, laughed at, can still hold under pressure. Historians still debate how this chapter ends. Maybe they'll debate it forever. Maybe there won't be an ending. Just a slow fade into the background noise of American history tucked between headlines about elections, indictments, and whatever comes next. Or maybe, just maybe, this is the start of a new rulebook. Either way, as the sun sets over Mar-a-Lago and the headlines start to cool, one thing is certain. The story isn't really about boxes, or basements, or even classified folders. It's about the question that every nation eventually has to face. What happens when the rules apply to someone who was never supposed to be told no? Thank you for listening to the story. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and stay tuned. Because trust me, there are always more stories where this one came from.